Hello, and welcome to the Unlock Podcast, an innovative approach to human development. Today, I'm joined by two Unlock coaches, Macarena Vergara and Camila Valenzuela. Hi, Macarena. Hi, Camila. Can you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. My name is Macarena, and I am a coach and a leadership trainer and facilitator, and I'm also head of our learning and development programs in the humanitarian and development sector. So lovely to be with you today, Camila and Amanda.
Lovely to have
Yes. Thank you very much for the invitation, Amanda. I'm an organizational psychologist and an essential coach, and I do facilitation in agile leadership trainings and also in leadership programs coaching.
So thank you so much for being here with me today. We're going to talk about a very important subject that affects our industry, and not everyone really knows about it. So we're going to address a conversation on psychological safety. But again, not everybody knows what it is and how it is defined. So how would you define it, Macarena?
How would I define psychological safety? So the way I understand it is that there's a space in any team, any organization, where people feel free to be themselves, as in entitled to expressing their truth without there being a punishment or a judgment coming their way. So there's a level of trust and a level of nonviolence, I imagine, in the communication, right, that enables people's brains not to be threatened by any potential punishment in the environment. But I'm sure Camila would have something to add. Camila.
Yes, of course. Thank you. And having this free space and trustworthy space to express yourself, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a nice place. It's a space when we can be different and all the voices are equally respected, but it does bring conflict. And we need some tools to deliver this conflict in a constructive way for the team, and to acknowledge our differences into a common outcome. Because psychological safety, we are speaking here in the sense of team development in the workspace. And we think it's an important topic to approach, as we are in these huge transitions of and understanding the culture at the workspace, and also in this hybrid work space, and also in this technological disruption that at some points creates a lot of separation. And this concept brings us together. To create a high performance team requires to have this psychological safety space.
That is so interesting what you just mentioned. And what really clicked with me was when you said that it doesn't need to be like a nice or perfect space, because it's very, kind of customized. So that is very important to acknowledge that, it doesn't have to be nice and perky and bright, but it just has to be, a conscious and viable space for these behaviors to be able to, be enabled within a team. So let's continue with another question that I have for you regarding psychological safety. Why do you think it's important, especially like in these like times, that we're kind of like in a very digital era? Why do you think it's important, psychological safety? Macarena.
So Camila has mentioned something. It is about high performance or effective teams. If you look at what is at the heart, what are pillars for high performing teams, effective teams, you have to have a layer of trust, a layer of psychological safety as a precursor to then having commitment, accountability, achieving results. You have to work on creating that layer, because otherwise the communication and the trust will fail, and you will have a lot of behaviors and a lot of truth and a lot of integrity going into toxicity. So there has to be an explicit and deliberate effort in working at these layers, so that the rest, the more transactional aspects of team building and team working, can function. And also psychological safety is all about having voices included into the space, right? And so really creating the conditions for innovation. But I'm sure Camila has something to add around that.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Macarena, because it also requires, in this sense, learning from failure. And of course, reframing the meaning we have of failure as a place of being willing as a team to make risks based on these conflicts and create possibilities that we couldn't even see by our own voice, our own frame of this view. So framing all together with all these different perspectives, all being respected, despite it creates failure or risk-taking. So having the space to be vulnerable enough to innovate and learning from this failure and having this radical candor to have each other's back in this process. Because when you want to have a high performance team, that's not just in one shot. You need to iterate and iterate and iterate until the team gets synchronized and you all know what are your talents, what do you bring, what's the light that you are bringing into this space. And the light you brought to a previous team is not the same that you could bring to this one, because it's a self-discovery space also.
Yeah, so it's kind of like an ongoing, continuous learning process to actually be able to implement a cohesive psychological safety measurements within a team. So this actually is very connected to what I would like to ask you. How can you create psychological safety as a leader? Like, how can you make that happen if it's so different and so like disconnected one group from the other? Macarena.
So, first, you'd have to start with yourself, right? So there's an angle around self-awareness to understand when you are or not in integrity in a team. So, you know, when we start leadership training, you always start with the self, not just for leadership purposes, but you need to check inside yourself what it is that you need to curate, what it is that you need to develop in order to co-create psychological safety. So I think Camila will talk a little bit probably about the emotional intelligence aspects, as in how you can be self-aware and self-regulating enough. But what really interests me as well is the interpersonal. So you have to have tools within a team in order to regulate those relationships so that everybody can stay in integrity and yet still communicate, like Camila was saying before, without fear, what they need. Because in any team, there will be conflict, there will be tensions, there will be discord. But as long as you can communicate effectively without alienating people's brains, then the truth can be brought to the common space because people will be willing to listen. But I think Camila will probably want to elaborate on that. So Cami, what do you think?
Okay, as Macarena was saying about what a leader requires to do this, creating the psychological safety space, it's very important, the team performance, team development, the team self-awareness. But to get there, it's very important the individual self-awareness anchored in the emotional intelligence dimension that could be brought by the leader through naming and labeling what's needed by himself, what are the shortage he has, what are the shadows and vulnerabilities we bring. And that requires a lot of courage and compassion. So also to invite the team members to express what are their talents, their skills, but also what they need to develop there at that specific point of the team development process.
Thank you so much for that inspiring answer, because this is such a well connected, like both like statements. So Macarena talked a lot about truth. So, you know, kind of like truth will set you free, and then self-awareness, that's how you actually get there. You know, you need your truth and to be self-aware to get there, to actually deliver psychological safety in a way as a leader that you can enable your the people that are members of your team to actually do the work that is required. So thank you so much for this insightful answer, and so well connected. So my last question for today, because I'm pretty sure we can continue talking hours about this, is what does it require of like a team member? So we already talked about leaders. So as a team member, how can we co-create psychological safety in, you know, around us, essentially?
So in my experience, we need to work on our judgment, because we're all very quick at judging, and we're all very quick at creating environments where people may not feel safe, and we can do this very unconsciously, right? So, but working on our judgment, working on mindfully staying open and curious and committed to not knowing, and always seeing situations with fresh eyes. It is a tall order, but that is something that we can work on. And these are behaviors that can be developed, and we work on them in leadership training. So also seeing ourselves as learning entities, right? Being part of an iterative process of developing ourselves as a learning team, as a learning organization, and considering that learning is not failure necessarily. Learning is learning, right? So also considering that there is a level of reliability and a level of honesty in communication, and also credibility that needs to be there in order for it to be trust. So these things are not necessarily a given. So we need to make agreements as a team also as to what constitutes reliability, mutual accountability, etc., for there to be trust, for people's brains to relax, for there to be psychological safety, right? Because we can't really necessarily feel safe if our colleagues fail us in any of these measures, right? So there are agreements to be made. There's also a setup where if we are still developing, that there's no punishment, that it's all considered growth and learning, so that everybody can safely transit this. These are the two ingredients I would say are important.
It's very important for the team members to move towards a growth mindset where they can move from a competitive belief to a collaborative belief, and understanding that the person next to them is not a danger, but it's a person that will help them to grow together and get to the outcome, because we cannot get together by ourselves. We need to build this team and connect our different talents and needs towards the common outcome.
Thank you so much for your answer, Camila and Macarena. So, well, the key ingredients, as you mentioned, Macarena, I'm pretty sure will get a lot of people actually aware of what is psychological safety and on roads to actually becoming a psychological safety aware leader as well as a team member. So thank you so much for coming and joining us today here. Would you like to add anything regarding any experience that you've had regarding psychological safety, or anything in general that you would like to add about this topic?
Well, I would say that it's not an easy journey, right? So if you have a team that is feeling highly unsafe, there needs to be a will, so to speak, to turn this team around. And it's a communal effort, as Camila well points out, it's a collaborative effort. And there needs to be a conversation, but also the team needs to learn some tools how to do this. So it's not just having the conversation or the willingness, but practicing tools that will enable them to shift behaviors little by little. That's what I would add. Camila, do you have anything to add?
I will finally add that it requires a humble leadership to foster generosity within the team. And this leadership is spread through the team, enhancing the diversity so we can get this mixture of the talents. And it also requires a lot of humbleness.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for all this valuable information, and hopefully people become a little bit more aware of psychological safety and how to deliver it both as a leader and as a team member within their organizations. So thank you, Macarena, and thank you, Camila, for coming today. It was lovely having you here.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Macarena.
Ciao, Camila. Thank you.
Yeah. And to our listeners, just stay tuned as we continue to unlock human potential.